I'm the practice director over the SharePoint team, or the collaboration and content services team. And really what that means is our teams primarily focus around knowledge management and information architecture related to SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, and the array of other tool sets within the Microsoft 365 cloud that really brings the technology to the table that allows organizations to focus on knowledge management. And we really approach this conversation from a knowledge management because the technology is only one piece of the pie, and we'll get into that momentarily. Presenting with me here in the room, because you'll kind of see us probably looking side to side at each other a little bit, is my partner in crime, Ben. I'll let him introduce himself quickly.
Yep, so my name is Ben Taylor. I work with Kip on our content and collaboration services team, mainly helping with information architecture, intranets, SharePoint Online, Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, and things like that.
Unfortunately, we have to like mute and unmute as we go over the areas. All right, so our agenda today is as such. First, I want to lay the groundwork is why an intranet is critical, and why, even if you have a current intranet and you're not getting the success or at least the ROI out of that investment, why you shouldn't give up on it, and the role that intranet plays in the larger picture of things. And then Ben's going to talk about the approach and recommended features around building a world-class intranet. And this is based upon our experience of working with a large amount of companies, both enterprise, very large, to smaller mom and pop shops, and what we've seen work and not work. And then on the not work side, I'll cover those typical mistakes and challenges. And I really just chose a couple that I think are just super critical as the key areas that I think most of our clients need to focus on. Now, if there's aspects or questions, or you're looking at this agenda, you're like, man, you know what? They may not cover what I hope that they'll cover. Grab that chat within the Teams client and start putting your questions in. Don't wait until the end. Put your questions in throughout the presentation. We'll try to leave ourselves enough time to address those questions. The true intent of this presentation and this meeting today is to leave you guys empowered with additional information that you didn't know previously, and put you on the path of hopefully implementing an intranet that causes transformational change within your organization, whether it be a culture or improving efficiencies with employees or getting them connected in this post-COVID-19 world that we live in. So please give us some feedback in the chat so that way we can make sure that this session is valuable to you. All right, so we hear this phrase, right? Knowledge is power. And I'm going to call BS on that. So knowledge is not power. Our ability to act upon knowledge, whether it due to discipline or the fact that we can even access knowledge, that is actually what's powerful. And this is where we fell in the modern intranet world, in the modern workplace. Usually knowledge is not the problem, right? If anything, I'd probably suggest that most of our organizations, we have the knowledge. The problem is I don't know where it is. It hasn't been organized, or I get the knowledge when I don't need it. And we need to focus on how do we get information to the right people at the right time so they can be efficient at their jobs. And that is the overall objective around what knowledge management is. Now, let me pause for a second. The whole knowledge management conversation is not just an intranet, right? A knowledge management conversation is around processes, around collaboration, around enterprise search, around intranets. It's around explicit and tacit knowledge and connecting people with one another. It's a very, very broad conversation. And that's why so much when we work with our clients and they say, hey, you know, JourneyTEAM, we want to bring you guys in to build a world-class intranet, we pause and go, well, let's have an information architecture and a knowledge management conversation first so we can identify the role that the intranet will play in that bigger picture, because it's only one piece of the bigger picture. And we need to make those distinctions as we talk about intranets. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, and then we'll just really deep dive into intranet specifically. Now, one thing, and I almost left this quote out because I use this all the time. And anyone that's seen any presentation I've ever done, I probably mentioned this like 40 times, but I think it's so powerful, right? So if HP knew what HP knows, we'd be 3 times more productive. And this is by their former CEO. And I think we can all say that. I can even say that about JourneyTEAM. We could even do a better job than we do today. And we have the knowledge, we have the expertise. The problem is we don't know how to get to it, right? or we have failed to be disciplined enough to classify and organize our content in a particular way. And Microsoft has an array of these tools that are going to help us in this area. And that's ultimately what we want to kind of bring to the table as part of this conversation. Now, the knowledge management conversation, I was alluding to this earlier, and I won't steal too much thunder from Ben because he's going to talk about this. But I want to reiterate, we are talking about organizational content and communication, AKA intranet. We are not talking about collaboration. We're not talking about individual file storage. We're not talking about ad hoc conversations. We're focused on intranets today. And I will argue and debate with anybody that an intranet is not all those things. No, no, no. An intranet is corporate approved audience content that's focused on the broad audience of individuals. And it can be used as a portal, right? But the content by which HR presents on the intranet that is formalized and official is so drastically different than the internal secured content in which HR collaborates on. And we want to make sure that we make that distinction, and Ben will kind of dive into that further. So why is this intranet conversation important? And here's a statistic that Microsoft presented last week at Ignite. And I thought this was really just kind of sums it up. 7 weeks a year, a person spends searching and or recreating information. 7 weeks. Could you imagine if any of us had 7 weeks to actually just be more productive? Right? This is a gap. This is $1 billion problem around Fortune 500 companies, and it needs to be addressed. And we address it. One of the ways that we address it, or an aspect of it, gets addressed in the intranet conversation. Now, we would be overlooking things if we didn't consider the fact that the workforce is changing, right? Not only is it changing in the sense of unemployment being high and the workforce being low and all kinds of craziness, but there's some shifting, right? A lot of companies made some major investments over the past 2 years to allow their employees to work remotely. And through that process, whether it's, cost savings of real estate and or the change in the workforce and their expectation that they want to have flexible schedules, that they want to be able to work remotely and they want to be able to come back into the office, right? And a lot of leaders within across multiple industries are adjusting that flexibility of where people work. And so the idea of an intranet sitting inside of a network that you have to VPN into, or me staying connected to the organization through being in person, is going to be less and less probable. And we need to make our modern workplace a digital intranet that actually keeps us connected and keeps our employees informed in the climate, in the world in which we live in, which is post-19 COVID-19 world. So so let's go ahead and swing over to, what does building a world-class intranet look like? You're picking me up. And Ben will ultimately go over that approach and what those features, and then we'll hand it on over to him, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about some common mistakes.
Thanks, Kip. So Kip's really highlighted the keys to why we need an intranet today. So really the next step in that process of creating an intranet is how you're going to do it. So we're going to walk through a few different steps, key steps that you need to remember while you are creating your own organization's intranet. So we'll just hop to the next slide here. Okay. So the first thing we want to talk about is an information architecture. So when you're architecting your intranet, you need to recognize that collaboration and content has many different bubbles or spheres. At its center, and this diagram, it highlights all of these different spheres of collaboration. So at the center, we have the individual collaboration, things like, you're storing a document on OneDrive, you have your personal files, maybe you have some emails that you save later on. From there, you may shift over, and we'll shift to another form or sphere, and that's the ad hoc conversations. So things like a quick chat message to appear. An email, maybe you're sharing a document with somebody else to just review and approve. Maybe you're sharing something directly from OneDrive that you and one other person needs to really collaborate and work together on. And then from there, we have collaboration groups. So those collaboration groups, maybe at a smaller company or something like a department like HR, they're all working together on specific documents and to reach an end goal. So they may have a team within teams, they may have a shared mailbox, maybe they have a notebook where they store all of their meeting notes. We also have inactive storage. So I know a lot of companies, maybe, for example, a medical device company may need to keep content for 10 years total. So you may store this content that isn't going to be used for the next 10 years in this inactive storage to await its deletion point. And then finally, you have the major bubble that we're talking about today, and that's the organizational content and communication. So things like, this could be a company-wide email sent out to everybody. It could be a flyer to inform about the next company party. It could be KPIs that people need to know about or review on a daily basis. So really, as part of the first step on setting up and working towards your intranet, you need to understand and recognize what content is organizational content and what content is not. Because the content that is organizational is the stuff that we want to focus on within the intranet.
I have a hard time staying quiet, so I'll do my best. In our survey, we had a couple of people that don't have an intranet, and I like to use this. You have an intranet. The difference is your intranet is org-wide emails. It's posters being printed out on walls. It's flyers being handed to people. We all have the need for quote unquote organizational content and communication. The problem is it's all over the place. It's emails, it's file shares, it's all these different things, right? And hopefully by the end of this presentation today, you guys get the idea of like, oh, hey, you know what? Maybe that's highly inefficient to do it that way, right? And we'll talk about those specifics.
So once you identify the content that you're going to put on the intranet, the next key step that you need to figure out and to determine is what's your vision and what are your goals? Where are you trying to get with your intranet? Now, we have a few ideas for different goals that you could use within your organization, but obviously each organization is different. They're going to have their own individual unique goals and needs. So these are a few that you can absolutely use, but really look and try and find the ones that are specific to you and your needs. So the first goal or vision that we would suggest is to increase collaboration among users. So really in this post-COVID-19 world, we're going to have, it's increasingly more important to have more collaboration and really to connect employees together. People are working remotely and really things become business. You jump into a meeting, business as usual. So we're getting to the point where we need more and more of that personal connection with our coworkers and other people in the organization. So with your intranet, you could set a goal of increasing that collaboration and trying to connect employees together. And later on, we're going to show you a few ways that you can do that. So that's one goal that that you could use within your organization. Another thing would be to audience your intranet. So really what that means is you identify the audiences in your organization. So let's take, for example, a company that is multinational. You may have a location and a headquarters over in Mexico, and then another one over in the US. The content that's specific to the people in Mexico isn't going to apply to the people in the US and vice versa. So if we start posting Spanish content everywhere and the people in the US see all of that content, it's not going to be very helpful to them and they may start ignoring it and it may just become noise. So it's very key to identify audiences that you're trying to target so that when you're creating content and trying to spread it to everybody across your organization, it hits the correct people and that they can consume it in the most effective manner. Another goal to keep in mind is to be flexible and to encourage feedback. So I know something that's hard is you put a lot of personal ownership into this intranet. You try and own it, make it the best you can, and then maybe you launch it and people start giving feedback and things, it may not be working super great. So really having the goal in mind from the get-go that when you roll out this intranet, that you want to encourage feedback, that when people start providing feedback and really trying to help improve the intranet to the best that it can. So when you roll it out, you want to make sure that when the feedback comes, you're flexible and you're willing to make changes to the intranet to best help your employees and fit their needs. Because at the end of the day, the intranet is for them. And the last thing to keep in mind is to make sure your intranet is mobile friendly when needed. A lot of companies today, for example, if you have a construction company, 90% of your workforce may be on site. So they may not be sitting at a desktop. And so your intranet and the design of it may differ because you need to make sure it's mobile friendly. Whereas if you have a workforce that is mostly on a laptop or a desktop, the design of the intranet may be slightly different. So these are a few goals and visions to keep in mind, and there may be some more that you want to add specific to your organization. But once you have your vision in mind and you know where you want to go, the next question is, how do we put this all together in an intranet? So there's a few different ways that we are going to suggest to you. And really this acronym right here, LATCH, is how we're going to help you remember ways to structure your content with an intranet. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is location. So location could refer to many things. One idea is that example I gave earlier. Maybe you have locations in the US and in Mexico. So you may structure your intranet so that you have content specific to the US in one location and content specific to Mexico in another. Maybe you have a few different offices, and so you need a few different buckets of locations so that when you're producing that content that's specific to those locations, it goes to those people that are needed. In addition, location can also refer to the physical location. So when you're putting different links or sites or key links or key applications on your intranet, the highest priority items need to be placed in the location that is easiest to find. So the main page, when you go to the main page, the highest priority content should be on the main page. And then as you branch out and get to lower priorities, then those become or get shifted to the lower priority areas that people will look at less. The next thing to keep in mind is alphabet. So let's take this dictionary, for example. If we opened a dictionary and sorted it by the date each word was created, the dictionary wouldn't be very helpful. You know, we may have alphabet created in 1742 and then the definition. A zebra created 1743. It's the very next word, but definitely isn't an easy way to find things. So not only are you going to need to know what word you're looking for, you're also going to have to know more information like when the word was created. So really sorting things alphabetically is a very easy way to help people find content and information easier, and one way you could use in your intranet. So this next slide here, so this image here is of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall. And when I first saw this, I initially thought, you know, all of these veterans, I would assume that they're all rearranged or arranged alphabetically. You know, that would make it easy to find all of the different soldiers and the people who had lost their lives. But actually, how they've organized all of these people are on the dates that they were killed. And when you do that, it creates a whole different story. And it provides a lot more meaning and impact in a way that sorting alphabetically or in another way can't. So time is another way that you could sort your information. And when it's effective for you, it's a very effective way to use it. So the next thing is category. So if I go to the grocery store and I see one of these aisles, I may see breakfast and frozen foods. When I see these categories, I immediately have associations. So if I think of breakfast and frozen foods, I probably already think, oh, there's pancake mix, cereal, syrup, maybe there's bagels. It's frozen foods too, so there may be some sausages, bacon, and everything like that. So categorizing your data into buckets will allow users to immediately have associations that are beneficial and helpful for them. As an example,
Well, I have to say this, you know, I was thinking about this too, is how those categories are related to one another matter too, right? It's like, for instance, imagine that you had the breakfast cereal aisle, and in the same aisle, you had dog food and cat food. You would immediately go, geez, you know, that cat food's a lot like the cereal I'm eating, right? Or it's similar, and it would create a context of relationship, right? I'm drinking this Bang, and it'd be quite ironic if energy drinks were in the same aisle with like cleaning chemicals, right? And you're like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be drinking this, right? And so not only are the categories good, but how the categories relate to one another, right, is part of that overall conversation.
And we'll show an example of how this is very effectively used later on, but we'll leave it at that and we'll jump to the next one here. So the last part of this acronym that we want to mention is hierarchy. So this is very similar to that location and kind of combining all of them together. So what is the highest priority and most vital things that users need to know and understand within your intranet or really find? And that's what needs to be the main focus of the intranet. And then you build up from there. So it's really a priority and a hierarchy of data and structuring your intranet so that the highest priorities are the main focus, and then you build from there. So as an example, we have a slide here. We'll go to the next one. So here's an example of ways that we have suggested or built within our own organization today. So we've really focused on the categories personally. So you'll see there under the My Career and Benefits, immediately when you think of My Career and Benefits, you think of things like 401k, PTO, health insurance, all of those personal items that somebody needs to know for their personal lives. Under My Career, you may start thinking about learning, development. And so we have all of those different criterias and sections that fall under that category. The next section there is support and resources. So these are things like an IT support request. Maybe these are policies and procedures. Really anything that's support related or resources or general information that's needed to know. And the last bucket is the R company, just general company information. So this may be some reports. This could be the mission and values of the company. This could be company events that are coming up, and anything that is complete and whole company related general information. So go to the next one. And really, at the end of the day, when you have all of these categories, or you've determined how you want to organize your data, the whole end goal with all of this is to make it easier for your employees. At the end of the day, if you can organize things better, it makes everyone's life easier, people get bugged less, and we essentially reduce that 7-week time that Kip had mentioned earlier. So once you know how you're going to organize your data, the next step is how are you going to populate your intranet? And a key thing to know here are champions. So champions are an amazing way to really distribute the ownership across your organization. So the distribution of your intranet and who owns it will exponentially increase the value of your intranet. So let's take, for example, you have a section for My Career and Benefits. Maybe you take a person from HR and they become the champion of the intranet. What are they going to do? They're going to reduce the strain on the core intranet team. They'll immediately have a circle of influence. So they're going to be able to help their peers around them. They're going to have different ideas that the core intranet team don't really know about. They'll be able to identify different business challenges because they're directly within HR. And they'll also be able to provide feedback as they're working with other people in the organization. People are going to come to them. Maybe they have some frequently asked questions that they get, and they'll be able to answer them or redirect them and know how to update the intranet best to help answer those questions and make it easier for the people looking for information and also their lives because they're the ones having to answer those questions as well. So just to recap that, they're going to reduce the strain. So identifying key people within your organization that can own different parts of the intranet and build that sphere of the different sections will reduce that strain. They're going to build that circle of influence. They'll bring new ways of working. They're going to identify business challenges and solutions. They're going to provide feedback to the project team. And ultimately, they're going to exponentially increase the value of your intranet. So these are all of the different ways of how you could really structure your intranet and approaches you could take. And so now we want to cover a few of the features that are beneficial and helpful for you to know about. So I'm going to take over sharing from Kip here. And we'll walk through a few of the features that we have implemented within our own intranet. So one of those key things or goals or visions that we suggested was a way to connect employees and increase collaboration. So within JourneyTEAM, we've created a custom web part here called employee recognition, or we'd like to call it fist bump. So anybody can come in here and add a recognition. So I can come in here, choose a category, recognize somebody. So let's take Kip, for instance, and give a reason and justification behind it. And then it will share that recognition across the whole organization. So if we look here, Jeff over here has been recognized by Jesse, Alicia by Logan, and it just creates a whole lot of collaboration and connection amongst employees. And we get to be recognized and help employees to feel special. Another thing to keep in mind is mobile first. So when you look at this specifically in SharePoint, SharePoint is very flexible and allows you a lot of flexibility to build around your different mobile needs. So if we look at this site here, how SharePoint works is each page is built and separated into sections. And these sections are going to be placed one on top of each other. So when you're building out the intranet, you may need to put the highest priority sections on the top. So let's say, for example, these quick links over here may be the highest priority in what somebody on a mobile device needs to know first. So maybe if we were building for a mobile first intranet, we would shift these links to be above the news right here. Another nice feature here is to build some sort of team directory, some place where employees can come and find people and find the people they're looking for. So this is another custom JourneyTEAM solution. So for example, something that we've done is it lists all of our employees within JourneyTEAM, but on top of that, it connects to their Delve profile. So each person in our tenant has their own Delve profile where they can update their skills and talents. So let's say, for example, I have a problem and I need somebody with a specific skill set. So let's say I have a software problem and I need somebody who knows Python. So if I come in here and search by Python, I can see two different users or two different employees who know Python and would be able to help me with my problem. I can then go contact them and they could then help me and assist me with those needs. The next thing to keep in mind is news and communications. So within your news in SharePoint specifically, it is very beneficial to use the news and audience it specifically to the people. So you can filter these news based on different sites or based on different people. So if you need news to target specific audiences, you can create specific content on here and choose the audience that you want it to go to. So let's say you have an IT specific news event that everybody needs to know about. You would add a news, and then you could make sure that these news web parts are focused towards each individual audience. On top of that, within your different news web parts, there's also a feature for news digests. So let's say there's key news posts that somebody on, for example, content and collaboration team need to know about. They could come into this news list and email a news digest as well. So this is a very nice feature to highlight content and have it emailed out and highlighted to the people that need to know about it most. So you can just come in here, hit next, and then it will send a news digest or a news email with the different news posts that you've highlighted. And to give an example of what that looks like, here's one that I sent myself earlier today. You'll see all of the different news posts. And if I wanted to, I could come in here and click each one and review each news post. Another great feature that SharePoint has built in as well is this waffle menu up here. So a very nice feature within intranets today is to have a portal to apps and other important external content. So within SharePoint and obviously within Microsoft 365, we have a bunch of different applications and features that within that waffle menu, we can quickly access. On top of that, you may have external reporting options that everybody needs to know. So there may be company reports that you may want to go and access and everybody needs to be able to access. Maybe you can't put it in this menu, but there's also different features within this menu bar that you can modify and customize as you needed. So for example, we could put it here, personally at JourneyTEAM, we've set it up over here on the right side under our company reports on the main page. So this takes us directly to our Power BI reports, where we can come in here and track and access all of the different reports that we may need to know about. And the last thing is really centered around connecting employees and collaboration. So another custom application that we've created within JourneyTEAM is this polls and quizzes. So you'll see here, I already answered this one, but we have created a web part here where people can come in. It's a nice little, we put a seasonal quiz or question or poll here, and everybody that comes to the intranet can come and vote. It may just be a poll where we're just trying to get feedback from everybody in the organization, or it just may be a fun little collaboration and connecting people together. So we have a couple questions and polls, and you can see how everybody voted too. So let me give the sharing back to Kip here.
All right, you got me. You know, I love that. There's a couple things I wanted to point out with Ben going over those couple items. And one of the things you talked about was champions. And if anyone hops online, you actually look through strategic strategies around causing organizational change outside of intranets. I'm just talking about, hey, you want to implement a new culture within the organization, or from a strategy of change management. It is a known fact that one of the most effective approaches to that is to identify your early adopters, people that are passionate about the implementation of the change, and where they can actually work within their peers. And once you get an adoption roughly of that 15 to 20% of the org, everyone else will adopt. And literally that is what the champion program really is. It's one, offsetting some of the responsibilities, because if you think about it, right, the intranet team doesn't know all the content that HR needs to publish. They don't understand how content should be served up from marketing, but marketing and HR does, right? And so they should play an active role, period, just to get the content organized and classified correctly. But they're also, we want people that are passionate about the idea, right? That have buy-in in regards to what we're doing. And which then brings me to like the power of a tool such as the employee recognition tool, or it doesn't have to be our employee recognition tool. It could be news posts where your organization is recognizing employees. Look at intrinsic motivators. What motivates employees are not just salaries, right? It's being recognized. It's being able to have a say in what's going on, to be continually informed about the happenings of the organization. And we need to look at what motivates our employees, but also what drives traffic to the intranet. Ironically enough, I've done intranets where the number one thing and the number one reason why employees went to the internet was for the lunch menu from the cafeteria. Right? So we need to know what's the low-hanging fruit that will drive traffic, right? And then we have to be consistent, and we have to make sure that information stays up to date so it becomes a reliable source of information. And far too often we have it in our mind what's valuable, but what's valuable to the employees are sometimes drastically different. And so getting some feedback from the employee base is super valuable and critical. Now, let me criticize you guys for a little bit, because I see 0 questions in the chat, and I'm going to get frustrated if you guys don't give us some questions. So, because we're going to give you guys plenty of time. So please take a moment, let us know what your pain points are, or how we can help, and what questions we can answer so you guys get the most out of this. So I'm going to cover what are those top, typical, most common mistakes and challenges. And I actually don't have that many. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I could give you 50, but the weight of all 50 are not created equal. And so let's focus on the big rocks, right? Of really, if you guys get these things right, you're going to be you're going to be ahead of the game, right? And your probability of having an effective intranet will skyrocket. So the first is that you need, and I'm paraphrasing here. Oh, why aren't I progressing? Okay. You need to stop using emails. So let me say it a couple times. Stop using emails, and let me say it one last time. Stop using emails. Like, literally, this pisses me off. It actually, you know, Landon says passionate. I think I just might be angry more than anything else. Maybe it is passion. I don't know. But let me lay the groundwork of how bad, if you really think about how providing information via email is. Okay, so I'll share this story. It was when I first got married. My wife surfed before I ever surfed, and on our honeymoon, we went surfing. And we're at the, I mean, so let me just say, I was so green in the experience that I actually didn't know that there were sets of waves. I just thought it was randomness. You know what I mean? That's how bad I didn't understand the ocean. And we're getting ready to go out and surf. And I'll be honest, I'm scared as ever. If it wasn't for the fact that we were newly married and I was protecting my ego a lot, I probably would have like backed out because I was kind of nervous, right? These are kind of some big waves, and I was like, man, I'm gonna die out here, but I don't want to be a wimp. So I'm like, yeah, no problem, I'll go surf. And we're getting ready, and like we're in the water, like ready for a set to come through so we could swim out. And she goes, oh, you know, I almost forgot something. I'm like, oh, what? And she's like, if you get disoriented in the water and you don't know what's up or down, reach down and grab the leash around your ankle and follow it up to your board. And of course that just made me more nervous, right? Because I was like, what do you mean disoriented, right? Like I'm gonna die here. But she said that to me. Now, within the hour, I got eaten alive by a wave, and I was panicking. I was underneath water, and I was swimming and I was swimming and I wasn't getting air, and I was freaking out kind of. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Like that thought crossed my mind. And then I remembered what she said. Oh, if you get disoriented, just grab the leash. I grabbed the leash, and it totally took me the opposite direction. So I was like swimming down, not up, right? Now, in that example, it worked out perfect. Now, if we take that same example and we applied it to what most of us do or most of our clients do, that would have been an email. And the email would have been, hey, Ben and all employees, in the event that you happen to go surfing, you know, use the leash to find the surface of the water. And then the majority of the employees are like, I'm not surfing though. I'm in the office doing other work. I have way too much work to do. I'm going to ignore this email. I'm going to delete it, and maybe I'll file it because maybe someday I'll actually remember where I put it, and I'll reference it if I go surfing. So in the context of corporate America, like 80% of the employee base would have died surfing if we relied on email communication to ensure employees knew what to do. And that's what we do. It is a lazy person's version of, I need to tell everybody something, but so I'm just going to put it on them, and I'm going to throw the data at them and let them figure out and consume it when it's necessary to them. So we got to stop this, right? And I'll talk about information overload here in a second. But your communication plan, and for those that say, hey, I don't have an intranet, you have one. You have intranet content. It's just spread all over the place. And so we have to identify, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm okay with the idea that, like, hey, Kip, you know what? Email works better for us. Okay, great. But at least be consistent with your communication plan. Where does data come from? How do employees know what's corporate approved content versus noise? And this is one of the struggles that I have around organizational wide teams is, okay, we're going to create an org wide team. Well, every employee is part of that team, and there's a chat thread. When is that used versus when is an email used versus when is a news post used on the internet? Or for some of you that are using Yammer, when is Yammer used? Right? It's got to be clear and simple to our employees of when you rely on what source of data for communication. And it shouldn't be like all of them. Okay. And unfortunately, Microsoft has made this tough, right? Like, and I was just joking with a client this morning about, what were we joking around about? I'm trying to remember. We're joking about Viva Learnings, which is a session, by the way, right after this. We're going to cover Microsoft Viva, which includes their quasi LMS tool. But like, they're like, oh, Viva Learnings, all right, it's another tool to serve up content. And the joke was, yet another tool that quasi already does something that we already have, right? And we could easily look at the slide and go, what should I use, Kip? Should I use org-wide team? Should I use SharePoint? Should I send emails via Outlook, or should I use Yammer? And the reality of it is, this is what most of you do. You do this. Well, and let me just pause for a second. This even gets more confusing the minute we add Workday. It's like, well, Workday kind of works as an intranet, and Salesforce has intranet capability, and SAP does. And, so where do I go for my data, right? And unfortunately, for a lot of our clients, they take this approach. Bam, we'll just throw it everywhere, right? And this is not the answer. This is not how it works. It's just like any IT service catalog. We need to be clear. These tools are for this purposes, and then we need to figure out a way, how do we communicate that to our user base? So we end up having reliable systems and authoritative source of data. And by the way, that eliminates rework and work that we have to do by publishing across multiple systems. So use that to your benefit. And one of the things that Ben mentioned earlier was the email digest. That works out perfect from an adoption perspective. I create a news post on SharePoint's intranet. How do I drive adoption? I use the news digest to send teaser emails to everybody. They don't get all the content. They get a teaser email that says, hey, if you want to read this, you got to click, and guess where it takes them? To the intranet. Use Teams as a teaser to go where? To the intranet, right? Utilize these other tools to disseminate the update, but the authoritative source of data needs to be clearly identified. And this is such a problem for so many different clients. So please come up with that communication plan, generate some consistency, and identify what are the authoritative sources of data for your organization. The second thing that we often see problems with is that, oh yeah, go ahead, sir.
You're going to be excited. You've got a question. So Josh Jones is asking, news digest via email. Okay. How was that done?
Yeah, we can actually demo that. So Ben, you prep that up, you get that ready, and then we'll have Ben actually show you how to do the news digest. And there's two ways. You can do a summary email. Well, actually there's three things we'll talk about. You know what? We'll come back to it and I'll explain why Ben demos. Is that cool, Josh? Okay, so the second thing that we commonly see is executive buy-in. And this is usually how this goes. Yeah, but Kip, you don't understand. We don't have executive buy-in, AKA it's the executive's fault. At JourneyTEAM, we like to practice something called extreme ownership. That's not extreme ownership, that's passing the buck. You don't get executive buy-in because we have failed to communicate the value clear enough, period. If we can't clearly communicate the value, then maybe it's not valuable, right? And so this is how we get executive buy-in. Clear communication of the value. How does that intranet, quote unquote, align with our company strategies? And then what's the art of the possible, right? Sometimes we operate in the area of we know what we know, right? And we know what we don't know. And then one of the benefits of bringing a third-party vendor in like JourneyTEAM is we get to create the art of the possible and say, hey, look at all these ideas that you weren't even on your radar that can be accomplished within a company's intranet. And that's, and to be honest with you, it's not the benefit of our expertise as much as it's the benefit of our experience, right? I've seen so many organizations do different things and sometimes having them work and sometimes not having them work, right? And that we're able to bring that experience to the table. But focus on communicating the value and aligning your intranet up with company strategies, and then presenting the art of the possible. And the art of possible for many organizations could mean everything about solid classification, organization of data, to having a streamlined enterprise search, to maybe integrating with Workday and SAP and these other systems so users don't have to navigate to Dell Tech Vision to get project data. It's served up through the intranet. We increase efficiencies. We centralize request forms and business processes. There's so many things that an intranet can do. We just need to identify, back to what Ben was saying earlier, we need to identify what are those big wins for your organization. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll get into that email digest, is this concept of information overload. In the grand scheme of things, if I had to classify why an intranet is critical and the number one thing that you need to do, it's addressing information overload. And I'd like each of you to pause for a second and say, what, and it's probably named wrong now that I think about it, but like, what is information overload ultimately? What does that mean, Kip? And I really broke it down into these categories, okay? So the first is multiple sources of information. It's kind of back to what I was talking about earlier. Where do I go for that data? Oh, you can go to Dynamics and get a subset here. Oh, we got a copy of that over here. Like, it's all over the place, right? So I don't know where to go to actually get the information. Now, if you think about it, that's not so much information overload. That's just an effective way to find data, right? That's really what that item is. The second is too much information. And this goes back to what Ben was saying earlier. Is your information audienced to me, right? We talk about this when we like, I use an example of a large client that we're working with right now. They're a single department has 200 people. And we might be tempted to say, oh, 200 people, that's a collaboration space. No, it's not. Why? Because 200 people, you're not effectively collaborating, right? What I hear from the 100 and probably 80 people that I don't work with is noise to me. It's way too much noise. And so we need to ask ourselves, the content of our intranet, is most of it noise based upon the personas that you establish within your org? And if it is, then you need to audience the content. You need to break it down in a way where I can get to what I need and not see all this other crap that I don't need. Now, is it okay that I can navigate to access maybe data that's not directly towards me, but it's for another group? Sure. Security and audiencing are two different things, right? But make it so I can get to what I need and not necessarily see all this content that I don't need, okay? Difficulty to manage the information, right? We run into this problem probably when we have clients that have kind of this managing the intranet with the iron fist, right? It's like we have the intranet team, they create all content and everything goes through them for approval. Oh my gosh, talk about major overhead, right? Oversight, a lot of governance, a lot of effort to be able to do that. Disseminating the responsibility of content across multiple content owners, across those champions, that's one of the best ways that we can manage data and reduce that difficulty. The second is relevance and unimportance of information. It's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, right? Is this data related to what I need to get my job done? The second is lack of time to understand it. So sometimes, and this is the simple rule, we don't make it simple. We overly complicate it. There's ways that we can actually identify the intent of content and then let them deep dive further, reducing the size of news posts and et cetera. So that way we're simplifying because we have jobs to do. And the last is kind of the analogy of when I went surfing with my wife, right? Information at the wrong time. And this really comes down to it's okay to provide updates. Hey, there's been an update to the expense report. But when you want to go read the expense report, the employee should know how to get there, right? They shouldn't have to download it and figure out where it's stored and everything else. And one of the other things that I like to bring up often is like, we publish all this content, and then if you hired a new employee tomorrow, do they have all those emails? No, they don't. So data's got to be organized in a way that people can get to it, whether they're newly onboarded employees or I need to find it 6 months from now, right? And that's really comes down to how we classify, how we tag, how we organize, as well as how good of an enterprise search product that we have, and using that breakdown of organization that Ben presented earlier around Latch. Okay, so that's it. Do information overload, address those key things. Let's address some of the questions. So the first question was around email digest. So Ben's going to get ready to present his screen, but let me lay out the 3 ways really quick. So I think it was Josh or Joshua. So the first one is you can create an email news post, and you can actually promote just that news post and just email that one post. So that's one option. You can actually just do one. The second is what Microsoft, and this is what Ben showed earlier, was the email digest, where you can almost like, hey, here's the last 4 articles, so you can select 4 and send those out. And then the third option, believe it or not, Microsoft already does it, right? And it's called the email digest. And so if anybody has not signed up for it, but you can configure your tenant to automatically send out personalized emails to employees within the organization, and it will send them news posts that they have missed, that they have not viewed yet. And that's just an automated email that goes out. I think it's, I don't know, maybe once a week, or
I think it may be once a week.
Yeah, once a week probably. Yeah, probably once a week. So anyhow, that's the other way. So I'll let Ben show maybe how to promote a news post. And then I guess you could show where the news digest is again, and then I'll be looking at these questions so we can address them more.
Okay. So the first one that Kip was mentioning was promoting a single news post. So if you create a news post, and we'll go ahead and navigate to one. Looks like it's gonna, my computer's running a little slow on Wi-Fi right now, so I apologize for that. So can you hear me on this, Kip? Okay.
Yeah. You're good.
Okay. So the first way is when you come to a news post, you can come up here in the send to option. And under the send to, you're going to have a couple options. One's going to be to email, another to Yammer. So if we click that email, you can then choose. So for example, let's say you have a specific 365 group or distribution list that you want to send this news post to. So you can come in here, add the email. So let me just go ahead and put Kip. Looks like he's not going to appear. Typically, I think I'm having some Wi-Fi troubles here, but
yeah, I'll talk. Really quick, are you guys, is he breaking up pretty bad, guys? Anybody? Or maybe thumbs up as an emotion or response if he's kind of.
He's sounding all right, but the screen is it's a bit delayed, so that's the only troubles
right.
I'm seeing.
Is it okay? But you're getting him right. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, you're good.
Sounds great.
I'll shut up.
Okay. Okay. So you can come in here, you can come to the send to, and yes, to answer your question, all users should have that ability to send to. So they can come in here, choose the audience that they want to send it to, type some message, and then hit send. And it'll send an email similar to the one that I had shown earlier. So that's how you're going to send it to a single user or a single news post. How you can send a group of news posts is that same method that we showed earlier. So on your news web part, you'll see all of the news here, but you'll also see the see all option in the top right. So if we click that see all option, okay, you'll then see a list of all of the different news posts within the organization. I don't know if my screen is updating or not. Let me know if there are any lagging issues or anything like that. But on that next screen, after you click the see all, there will be a list of all of your different news posts. In the top left-hand side, you'll see an option for email and news digest. When you click that email and news digest, it will then provide you the options to choose which news posts that you want to have included in the news digest. So in that, you would check all of the different news posts that you want to choose. And then from there at the bottom right, you'll see a button to do next. So you'd hit that next button. Looks like we're having some network issues here. So once you hit that next button, it will allow you to create a title for it. So we could say weekly news updates or / important news. You can then choose your audience and then also provide a little message here. Important news for you. And then from there, you just need to click this send news digest, and that will automatically email that news digest. That will look something like this to whoever you had specified. So any other questions? I know we're about up on time, so we appreciate you all coming. We can stay on for a couple more minutes to see if you guys have any other questions and answer them as needed. And just in case I missed that one from Ben, yes, all users have the ability to send to. So they can go to a post and then send to any user that they deem should know about that or a group of people as well.